and welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. I am excited to be joined again by my great friend and fellow guest host, Bryan Null. Welcome to the show, Bryan.
Thank you so much. It's always great to be here. I'm really happy to be here tonight.
I'm so excited to have you back on again. You've been on the show quite a few times over the years, and so I'm excited that it's only been a few months since the last time you were on the show. And we got to review this episode. We're going to review all 2021 critically acclaimed movies. So this is pretty exciting because we're getting into that time of year that film snobs hold so dear in their heart. The time of year I like to call Oscar season, but that's when a lot of the critically acclaimed movies all start to come out all at once, and it's, you know, the film snobs' dream come true. So we're reviewing quite a few of these today.
Yes, definitely. I'm excited to dive in.
Yes. So I'm going to just hit it right off because I know we're going to have a lot to talk about with these films because these are all ones with lots of meat to chew on, so to speak. With our first film, which is Passing by director Rebecca Hall. This follows the friendship of two women in the 1920s in New York. And one of the women is passing as white. And the other one is, how shall we say it, sometimes moonlighting in such a regard, but otherwise lives in Harlem and is integrated in her African American community. And then, these two women were childhood friends and then have kind of come back together again at a somewhat sort of uneasy friendship, maybe we should say. It's based on a book, a novel from 1929, so it was written at the time. And this is just, wow, I cannot talk enough about this movie. This is a 4-star film for me. I'm just going to put it out there right now. This will definitely probably be on my top of the year list. Multiple things I want to discuss here. We have two amazing performances by Tessa Thompson and Ruth Negga as the primary leads, and they're just both phenomenal. Almost opposite personalities. Ruth Negga is the woman who is passing, and she is this flamboyant, person who kind of lights up a room. People are drawn to her, like moths to the flame. And Ruth and Tessa Thompson's character is very kind of much more quiet, subdued, elegant, a little bit more conservative in her approach, and so. They have this kind of uneasy friendship, I would call it. Rebecca Hall, this is her directorial debut, which just kind of blows my mind because the filmmaking is so confident. Not only is the movie shot in a very interesting looking, kind of almost bleached out black and white, but it's also shot on a different aspect ratio than we would normally see for films, which gives it this feeling of almost kind of being in an old movie. So there's just multiple things. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it, Bryan.
Yes, absolutely. This film is amazing, and I don't know how Netflix calculates viewings, but I watched portions of this movie over and over uh,
Oh, well.
because there were scenes in it that were just spectacular. Um, I agree full-heartedly on Rebecca Hall's direction. That aspect ratio makes this kind of a claustrophobic film, which matches what these characters are going through. There's great tension in their um, in the diversity of their relationships or personalities in their relationship. Um, Ruth Negga is amazing and kind of jumps off the screen right at you from the very first moment we see her leg, which is the first thing we see of her. So even in
I
her
forgot about
passing,
that.
she's kind of slowly revealed to us, and to Tessa Thompson as well. Tessa Thompson's character, Renee. Um, one thing I would really like to draw attention to is the musical score, which is almost non-existent. It's barely there in the first portion of the film, and really only exists in diegetic music. And then what I initially thought when I was watching it, it seemed to be just kind of a trickling piano, solo jazz piano that followed. Initially, I thought just Renee around, and then it seemed to switch to Claire. And then I later realized that no, it's only present in Harlem. All the other scenes are just uncomfortably quiet, I felt, other than dialogue and overlapping dialogue and whatever other sounds might be there. So I really enjoy the direction of this film and the performances. I'd like to also mention Andre Holland as Renee's husband, Bryan, is incredible. And we won't reveal anything about this film, but in the last moments of the film, he and his wife, Renee, communicate so much with almost no dialogue that I think helps reveal some of the meaning behind what happened. those last moments are one of those sections I watched over and over again.
Yes, I watched this movie with my parents actually when I was visiting them in Arizona, and it was really interesting because we had to rewound the ending quite a few times because we were having debate about what really happened. Well, and I
Yeah,
won't talk about that now, but it's, and I think that they purposefully left it up to your debate a little bit. It's
yeah,
not 100% clear. I think there's different ways you could view what happens at the end. But I think that a lot happens in passing, shall we say, between people with their eyes in this movie. Even early on, when Tessa Thompson's character is, and that's Renee, you said was her character's name,
yes,
when she meets the husband for the first time. So Ruth Nega's husband in the movie is played by Alexander Skarsgård, and he is just a vile racist. I mean, there's just no other way to get around it. He
yeah,
wears it proudly on his sleeve. And so when she meets, her friend's husband, and he's just this, virulent racist, and she's a little taken aback, and just seeing the looks pass between them as he's talking, oblivious. He's completely oblivious. He's pouring them drinks. He's just talking, 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 and they're having all this talk. They're talking. They're having a whole other conversation just with their eyes and looks exchanged between the two of them. So what an amazing directorial debut. I mean, I've been a fan of Rebecca Hall as an actress for a long time. I think she's just a really interesting, confident actress to watch on screen. But to see her take this material on, I just super impressed.
yeah. And there's such depth here. There's kind of levels of passing. You referred to that earlier with Renee, or I think that's short for Irene in the film, kind of moonlighting as that. There's also the fact that they're fairly affluent. Her husband's a doctor.
Hmm.
They have a maid. All this kind of stuff, and it kind of begs these difficult, perhaps unanswerable questions about what is passing. And I know that authenticity is an overused word these days, but that's really what this is about to a degree. Like, who are they really?
Right.
It's interesting because Renee is very reserved. And kind of interior and doesn't actually speak honestly all the time. Whereas Ruth Negga, in spite of her passing, or Claire, the character, kind of wears her heart on her sleeve. So it's really interesting.
That is true.
Being,
She's living a complete lie as a life, but yet
yeah,
when she talks to people, and it's interesting the dynamic with the maid, because the maid obviously has a lot of tension with Renee, with Tessa Thompson's character of Renee. There's a lot of
yeah,
tension there, and mostly class, and maybe a little bit race related, but a lot of class. Whereas the first time Claire comes over to the house to visit, she just kind of hits it off right away with the maid,
yes,
very interestingly, which I thought, that's not what you're expecting from the film. So it's not, yeah, so you're right. Characters are passing in different ways, and it's not just about race. Class is very much intertwined in this whole thing. And even the fact that, and, one thing that's been brought up about the film that I'd be really curious to get your perspective on is, some people, when they're watching the film, think, well, it's kind of obvious, that both of these women are not white. Right. So, but I think that's a very literal interpretation. I don't really think that's what the movie's really about in a way. Does that
yeah.
make sense?
I would agree 100%. And in fact, I think a portion of that speaks to the fact that people see what they want to see. I mean, her husband doesn't seem to be unintelligent, though he's terribly prejudiced, but he doesn't see anything. He sees exactly what he wants, even though he makes comments about the fact that she seems to be getting darker as she ages and things like that. I think it's that idea that he's wanting to see what he wants, both in the black characters and in his wife who is passing.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
there's this great line that I will paraphrase. I won't quote. When they first meet, they have tea and champagne glasses,
Hmm.
and then the idea of tea kind of carries its way through the entire film, and you get that sense that that is symbolic. And I think there are probably many more symbols in the film than I'm even thinking
Oh
of,
yeah, I
but
think a lot. Yeah.
symbolic for that fact that passing off one thing is another. But what they really want to drink is this tea, in spite of what it's being served in. So
Hmm.
and then that leads to teapots and different things that are foreshadowing of our pretty spectacular and interesting ending.
Yeah.
Which, similar to you, I watched with my daughter Taylor, former camera person on Real Film Snobs,
Hmm.
and we audibly gasped at at the ending, and you don't often get that, especially now that we're watching at home. You know, the
Yeah, no,
reactions
I
aren't as
did too. We
visceral.
gasped too. My parents and I, we all went. We were really taken aback. So if you like a movie with a good surprise ending, this is the one for you. No, I mean, not Jurassic Park type surprise, but
Yes.
different type of surprise. So yeah, so you can recommend it then, I'm assuming.
Oh, absolutely. Recommend with 4 stars.
Yeah, great.
100%. So.
Well, we should move on to our next movie. I think the next one's yours.
Yes, and speaking of surprise endings, I'm going to talk about a film co-written and directed by Claudia Llosa. It's a 2021 feature from Chile, Peru, Spain, and the United States. And it is called Fever Dream. It's the story of 2 women, Amanda and Carola, who meet while Amanda and her daughter Nina are vacationing for the summer in Carola's hometown. Carola's son David is there as well. As Amanda waits for her husband, Carola starts telling stories about the terrible tragedies that have happened in this town that is her hometown, and especially the ones that have happened to her son David. They use a unique, unreliable narration in the film by both Amanda and David, and it's unreliable in that it's a mystery and they're under some unknown duress throughout the film. So it speaks not only to the mystery in the film, but also the things that are hidden. Though it's a story of friendship between these women, but it's really, I think, a thriller about control over the natural world by means scientific, spiritual, and even parental. And each of these contains some sort of concoction that may save you. It might save you partially, or it may even kill you. And it's also, I think, about protecting children and the tension that that creates. Amanda calls that protection of her daughter Nina the rescue distance, which is the Spanish title of the film. And Angela, I want to know, so A Fever Dream is a strange experience. Was this film a strange experience for you?
Oh man, was it? I'm still not sure I exactly know what happened in this movie, even though I just watched it actually pretty recently. So I had a few problems with it. It's not going to be a 4-star movie for me. I really got into it at the beginning because I thought, oh, this is a really odd movie. You have the unreliable narrators, as you mentioned. But I thought eventually, I don't expect a movie to explain everything to me, but I hope it explains something by the end.
Yes.
By the end, I was like, I'm not sure if I know anything that actually happened here. I like, though, when you brought that together about the issue of control, because that was one of my issues with it. I thought, okay, we almost have like 2 main threads going on here. We have the environmental aspect, which seems pretty clear, right? There's lots of scenes. We know that something bad is in the water. That's not giving away too much, because that's right at the beginning, right? And we know that this has been going on a while in this town, and more of that gets enveloped as the movie goes on. Then we also have this issue of the control, the issue of they keep talking about the thread that connects the child to the parent, right? And as you call it, also the rescue distance, which is like how far away is your kid where you can actually get to them to grab them if they fall into a pool or fall off a cliff or whatever. And I hadn't really connected those two before. That's interesting that you connect, because I kept thinking, well, those seem like 2 different threads. Maybe the movie should have picked one, environmental or parental. But the way you combined them into both being about control and things you can't control, like you can't control your child entirely, you can't control nature entirely, and making those the same, that makes it more interesting to me, actually.
Well,
so it's making me rethink my own review. Thank you.
Sure. Well, and even it's kind of about the things that those things almost don't matter when it's hidden, when whatever the danger is hidden from you, and so I thought those, to take it further, those threads were kind of interesting in this film, and I walked away initially very frustrated. In fact, I was watching this one with my son Josh, and we both were, when it ended, we thought, what was this? The
Right.
environmental section is pretty clear. And in fact, they play it off as a deeper mystery than it ends up being, I feel like, in the film. They maybe overstate that portion. But he and I visited about the film for about 15 minutes. And after about 15 minutes, we figured it out. we figured out the ending. We feel at least in a way that is satisfying and made this
Okay,
film
well, you have
better.
to tell me as soon as we're
So,
done filming. You have to tell
yes,
me because
yes,
I need to know because I don't think I figured out. What I will say, I was a little disappointed that the environmental aspect wasn't more explored and made it more interesting, and they kind of almost gave up on that thread. I think eventually and really leaned in more towards the parental aspect. So, which I think was maybe maybe had more mystery to it. Maybe that's why they went there. I do think for people that like a movie with a more satisfying ending where they kind of know what happened in the movie, this one's going to
yeah,
be really hard because I'm not someone that needs a movie wrapped up in a bow. But at the end, I thought, I'm not sure I understand anything. That I understood some parts of what happened, but I feel like there were some mysteries still
yeah.
to be explained. So
Well, in fact, we went in our conversation when it ended. We both kind of looked at each other and thought, this is a 2-star film. It's interesting, but I'm not sure I liked it. And then after those 15 minutes, we were kind of blown away by what we thought was the ending. And I said, well, that at least gets it another star. So I'm going to give this film 3 stars after conversation,
I
which
know.
is
And now
good.
I'm debating because I was thinking 2.5, and now I'm like, well, maybe I should upgrade it to 3. I will say it a beautiful look and fine performances by the 2 lead actresses. Just
Yes.
amazing work. So very excited. This filmmaker did a movie that I've never seen, but that was critically acclaimed before this one called The Milk of Sorrow, which I've heard is also very, very weird. So she's definitely a filmmaker to keep our eye on, I think, because
Yeah.
great visual look, lots of complex ideas. So
Yeah, I will definitely, when I'm in the mood for something weird, seek out the rest of her films.
yes, yeah, for
And
sure.
they're definitely interesting.
Okay.
All right, moving on to our next film, another 2021 film. This one is called The Harder They Fall. And I first came in contact with this film in spite of its recent release in 2013 when an incredible hip hop album called They Die by Dawn and Other Short Stories was released by a band called the Bullitts, which
Oh,
it turns out is the alter ego of writer, director, and composer James Samuel. Um, and the whole album is full of film references, particularly references to westerns, and the specifically the stylish and stylized westerns that came from Spain and Italy in the 60s and 70s. And so his tribute has finally come to fruition in this story about Old West vengeance and the rivalry between the Nat Love and Rufus Buck gangs. And this film is populated primarily by people of color, both in character and performance. And at the outset, Samuel reminds the viewer that though the story is fiction, these people existed. In one of the great castings of all time, I believe, we have Idris Elba, Regina King, Delroy Lindo, rising stars Lakeith Stanfield, Zazie Beetz, and I think a standout performance from Jonathan Majors, who's given a standout performance in every film I've seen of his. Um, and it's a tribute to both the real characters and the great westerns of the past. Does James Samuel succeed in his feature film debut, Angela?
oh my God. I was blown away by this one, Brian. I was worried it was going to be just all, I don't know what I was worried about, but I had a feeling, I knew he was a musician, and it's always hard to tell when musicians come out with a big movie, sort of like with Sorry to Bother You. I thought it was going to be all like gimmick and no meat there, but this movie blew me away. It's what a Western should be. I mean, it takes the conventions of the Western. It doesn't completely redo them. We still have the two gangs. We know what the tropes are, but it enriches it so much with this wonderful cast and gives each person so much to do. Idris Elba is the leader of the bad guys, so to speak, and Regina King, but they have a really interesting vision for what they're trying to do. They're not just like, oh, we're bad guys, we like shooting people. It's like, oh, he wants to build this whole town
Yes.
that's for black people essentially in the old west, that they're going to have their own place. And so it was
And
really
own
interesting to
own
me.
businesses and all
Right.
of these things.
Right.
Sorry.
He has, so even though, it doesn't excuse him for being a ruthless killer, but he's like an entrepreneur with vision. And Regina King's character, she's just backing him because this is her vision too. She doesn't care as much about all the killing stuff. She just wants to get this town built. And then you've got on this other side, as you mentioned, Jonathan Majors and Zazie Beetz, and on the good guy side, quote unquote, sort of, but they're also kind of, outlaws. They even give her own Marlene Dietrich scene when he first goes into the saloon and he sees her and she's doing a song, but they don't make it anything like Marlene Dietrich. They give it, it's totally her own thing with her own style and music. And and it's very stylized. And I loved that about it. It's not a realistic, quote unquote, looking Western. Every building is painted and set directed with an inch of its life, but it's in no way distracting. And I loved the music in every scene. And I didn't even get to Lakeith Stanfield yet. I mean, I knew, let's face it, it would be hard for anyone to make a movie with Lakeith Stanfield and Idris Elba together. It would have to be really bad for me to hate it.
Yeah.
But it was just one joy after another. As soon as when Delroy Lindo showed up, I was like, "What? More? Come on,
Yeah.
give it to me!" I was just like, "This is awesome!"
Yeah. Keep it
Like,
coming. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like, who else is going to show up next? I was getting so excited, and it made me think, like, why aren't folks like this in every Western? Because I mean, they're just amazing. The
Yeah.
swagger and the attitude that you need to pull off a Western. When you see a lot of modern Westerns, people just don't have it, and
Yeah.
everyone in this film is bringing their A game. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, it's the sort of film you could tell he's been thinking about all of his
Mhm.
life, about what he wanted to do with the
Imagining what it,
Western.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, even little things like they clear the streets of all the citizens of the town. Well, he shows you how that could happen. Where all these other films, it's like, where are all the people? All the gunfights
yeah. Why did
happening,
they all just disappear? Why the
Yeah,
guns
and
started? Yeah.
and he actually gives you a plot reason for that to happen. And the final showdown, and it's not a single showdown; it's probably 20 minutes of cinema,
Right.
is beautiful. And yeah, I love this film. I've been waiting for it honestly since I listened to that album because I knew he had a film in mind, and then I'd hear rumblings that he was working on something, and you'd
I had not
hear,
heard the album, so I'm excited
yeah,
now. But I did like the music in the movie, and I
yeah.
think the music was all original for the movie, right?
Yes, he composed nearly every song or remixed previous songs for it, and it gives us Lauryn Hill back. We haven't heard a song from Lauryn Hill in a long time, and it gives us an original song from her.
It's awesome.
That's something else I should mention is, using modern music, which in an older film has been experimented with, but it works here because he goes all in on it. It's not like that awkward scene I felt in the Quentin Tarantino Picture Inglorious Bastards, where kind of out of the blue we have a David Bowie song.
Hmm.
Here he's all in from the very moment, and it never feels wrong or weird or awkward.
Well, because it
And
never really feels like it's the Old West in the way we think of the Old West. It seems very
right,
much like an Old West of the imagination. Like I said, the buildings, the scene with the saloon, and then there's these women with and the Idris Elba. What was it in that scene where the women are all painted in blue, where it's like
yeah,
modern art? I mean, I don't think that was
yeah,
happening in the Old West. People barely even had teeth. They didn't look that beautiful, but it was just, it's highly stylized. It's
yeah,
fantastical, is what it is.
yeah.
So
And there's even a contrast there in Zazie Beetz' bar. It's very kind of rough and tumble, but very cool. And then this is very futuristic. It doesn't look at all like an Old West bar. It's got the modern dance going on.
right.
And so he's definitely drawing a contrast between the past and the future here. And I do want to say, I feel like this is the film Quentin Tarantino thought he could make when he made Django Unchained, which I view as a pretty mediocre film.
Mhm.
And this is incredible. This has the energy of somebody who's passionate about this project, passionate about the story, these characters, and knew exactly what he wanted to do. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
appreciate that.
I hope he has more in him. We'll see. But even if he only
Yeah,
makes the one movie, maybe it'll be like his Night of the Hunter, right? So,
yeah, I'll take
how
it.
much? Yeah, exactly. So 4 stars for you,
Absolutely, four and more if I could.
if you could. Yeah, Brad, how are we doing on time? I need a finger raise. How much we got? We got. Okay, I just want to make sure. So I got to move quickly on our next one, which is Nightmare Alley from 1947 by the director Edmund Goulding. It's about a carnival worker named Stanton Carlyle who schemes to steal the mind reading act of Mademoiselle Zena and her alcoholic husband Pete. Stanton Carlyle is played by then heartthrob Tyrone Power, who was mainly known up until this point for like swashbuckling, charismatic hero roles, and he wanted to do something completely different, and boy, did he. This film is a film noir. That's what it's labeled as, but it's a very quirky movie. Tyrone Power does such a good job playing Stanton Carlyle as this kind of smarmy, underhanded, but yet dashing guy who you never even really quite get his backstory. Like, why does he want in carnival work? Why does he want to do this work? And he quickly kind of gets into the realm of Mademoiselle Zena, who is played by Joan Blondell of all people, who a lot of people think of as being like a quirky comedy actress, and here, totally different type of role
Yeah,
for her. And she is, this kind of troubled woman who's, very talented at her mind reading act, but she's got this husband and they have this long story together, just this bad history of things that have gone on between them. And she's really keeps trying to help her husband. He is a very serious alcoholic. And then there's almost like a second half of the movie where it completely switches and then we bring in new characters. And I don't want to give too much away, but this is another movie. We have a lot of these this episode that are just completely unexpected where they're going.
Yeah, I agree. And Tyrone Power, it's the best performance I've ever seen him give, and he's a fine actor, so that's saying a lot, I feel like. But I was drawn to the three women. There's Joan Blondell as Xena, Colleen Gray as Molly, and Helen Walker as Lilith Ritter. And what I was drawn to is how different each of these characters are. And the two women that he kind of falls in with are Molly and Lilith, and they are exactly polar opposites.
Right.
Molly is a little bit kind of melodramatic and you think innocent, although she works for the carnival and says she can take care of herself, which she does. And then you have Lilith, who's this very quiet, introspective, but also manipulative, like psychologist in the film. And they sort of compete for his attention, but Lilith with more selfish means than Molly, who seems so pure. And I really love that sort of interplay between those characters that he is drawn to in the film. I really liked this film quite a lot. I had never seen it before.
No, me either.
We had talked earlier that there's a remake coming out this year, and I will give that credit for turning me on to wanting to watch the original, because I'm really happy I saw this. I had never seen it before, and
I know.
it's
on Criterion Channel for people trying to seek it out. I'm not sure if it's available on other channels, but I would highly recommend it. I loved it. I am interested to see the remake, although part of me wonders, it does seem like pretty classic. It's going to be hard to improve on this. The remake's going to have Bradley Cooper and the Tyrone Power character of Stanton, and it will be interesting to see if he can pull that off. I think the female cast looks a little more promising with Toni Collette and Kate Blanchett and Rooney Mara playing the three female leads. So it's a good movie in terms of roles for women. I know the new one's going to be in color, and that,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a film noir, so it's hard for me to see it in color, even though it is a circus. So you could see, if anyone can do it, Guillermo del Toro, I think, can.
Yeah.
But if nothing else, at least the remake coming out, drew me to watch the original.
Yeah, because it was a failure when it initially was released, is my understanding, and I'm really happy it's on my radar.
People thought it was way too weird for 1947. I can't even imagine. It's very seedy and it's very racy. Actually, I'm actually surprised it got past the code in a lot of ways. Tyrone Power, despite doing many mega blockbuster movies, still to his end of his days said he thought this was one of his best performances. So that's pretty impressive. So
it was incredible.
Definitely. Yeah,
4 stars
great
from me.
Movies. Yeah, 4 stars from me as well. So we've got 3 4-star films, right? 3,
yes,
yeah, and that's pretty impressive for an episode. So this is why we love this time of year, right? As film snobs, Bryan. So.
Absolutely, yeah.
So great to have you on the show, as always. I'm going to quickly wrap up here. Our website is realfilmsnobs.com. You can join us on Facebook, Twitter. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube. I'd like to thank, as always, our fantastic crew, especially Brad for taping the show and doing so much work on it, and our sponsors and CC Media. We're on Scan TV. We're on Corvallis Access Media. We're everywhere. We're on KMUZ Radio and KMWV Radio. Thank you again to my wonderful co-host and great friend, Bryan Null.
Thank you.
And have a great day and great movies. Goodbye.